Pat, this is so exciting for me to have this chance to talk with you. I'm so glad you're back here in your native Chattanooga, away from D.C. for just a little bit.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you, Becky.
You are a native of Tennessee, but you've had quite a distinguished career in D.C. You've been in the political arena with Howard Baker and President Ford and President Reagan, and quite a distinguished career there, as well as in the publishing world with the Washington Post. And now you're the head of America Public Television Stations, which is our government advocacy group there in D.C. What a great thing to have you back home.
Well, I've been very lucky, Becky, and it's great to be home. And I think Tennessee's just responsible for every good thing I've been able to do in my life. And I started out here at the Chattanooga News Free Press when I was still in high school, answering telephones in the sports department on Saturday nights, and then wound up as the City Hall and political reporter for the old Chattanooga Post, where I got to meet Senator Baker, and he brought me to Washington in 1969. He said, you ought to try it for a year or two and see if you like it, and I've been there 43 years.
Oh my goodness. What a great thing that is. You went to the University of Tennessee for college.
I did indeed. I majored in political science and had a fine time at the university. And in mid-career, I wound up in Washington at American University getting my master's degree as a middle-aged man, and it takes me a while, but all's well that ends well.
You teach there, though, right?
I teach some, and I'm vice chairman of the board of trustees, and I'm pretty heavily invested in American University, but also I was on the board of visitors for the UT College of Communication for about 12 years, and I got back here pretty often for those meetings and helped guide the school to a new future, which includes a great new building and newsroom that they've got now, and UT's on the move.
Well, it's important to create a whole new generation of journalists and people in public media, isn't it? I mean, you're talking about UT, but that needs to happen all across the country.
Well, it does, and it's a very exciting time to be in this business, Becky. A lot of people despair that newspapers are a thing of the past and journalism may not be as promising a career opportunity as it used to be, but the fact is that more people are reading good journalism, consuming good journalism now than ever before. The Washington Post, where I was happy to work for 20 years, was very proud of the fact that we had 1 million circulation on Sunday, which put us about 4th in the national rankings. But every day now, WashingtonPost.com reaches 20 million people around the country and around the world. And so people are very happy to be consuming our journalism in numbers that we were never able to achieve before because of the internet and the World Wide Web, and now in social media. And so the appetite for news and good information is stronger than it's ever been, and I would encourage anybody who wants to consider journalism or communication as a career to jump right in, because it's just going to get better.
That's exciting. Really, that is so exciting for me to hear, and I know for our viewers to hear. You have had an opportunity since this new part of your career, why, by the way, did you jump back in with public media? Why did you take this position?
I had been on the board of the Public Television Association for a couple of years when the presidency came open, and I'd been chairman of the Maryland Public Television Foundation for 6 years, helping to raise money for them and get them into education programs and other things in community outreach, and I really enjoy this work. I'd been a producer. I ran the television production operation for the Washington Post Company and produced a lot of documentaries for PBS over the years, and I love it. I'm committed to it. I think it does important things and essential things, and when I was given the opportunity to represent the public television industry in Washington, it was something I was really quite happy to do.
You also have a real, what I've read about you, and what seems to be very apparent about you. You have friends on both sides of the aisle.
I do.
And you have great connections, and people truly respect you and your opinion. So how has that benefited our industry?
Well, it's been great, and I learned that at the feet of Howard Baker, who made the United States Senate work like it never has worked before or since. I was at the funeral a few years ago of Tim Russert, the former moderator of Meet the Press, and happened to be sitting next to Senator Joe Biden, and Senator Biden was telling me that Senator Baker was the best majority leader he had ever served under, Republican or Democrat, because he made the place work. And that's been my mission for public broadcasting, is to make friends on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the hill, and get everybody to understand that public broadcasting should be viewed in the same way that public schools are, public libraries, public highways, that we are a public service, and that we ought to be looked at in the same way, because we provide the same kind of essential service in local communities around the country.
And you do travel and you see those stations in those local communities, just like you're right here in Chattanooga.
Well, it's true, and this brings me back to my political days. I went to every state except Wyoming with President Ford. And so being able to get back out into the country and see people in communities around the nation is quite a tonic for me. And I get to see all these wonderful things that are happening at the local level that are benefiting people in education, in job training, in public safety, and all kinds of other things that we're engaged in public television.
That's exciting.
It is.
When you talk about President Ford, you were his speechwriter. Is that correct?
I was at the time the youngest speechwriter in the history of presidential speechwriters.
Wow.
I've certainly recovered from being a young man now, but it was a great experience, and I got to live most of 1976 on Air Force One as we were campaigning for the president's election, first against Governor Reagan for the Republican nomination, and then against Governor Carter for the presidential election, and we came very close to winning, but we didn't quite make it. Now,
when Senator Baker was serving in the White House with President Reagan,
right.
You were a consultant for him then as
Right.
well, right?
Well, the senator came in to the Reagan White House in February of 1987 in the depths of the Iran-Contra scandal. And President Reagan asked him to come in and help straighten things out and get back on a better path. And Senator Baker asked several of his old colleagues and lieutenants to come in and help him, and I was one of those people, and it was a fascinating experience. It was not an easy experience. We had a lot to do to dig out from the Iran-Contra scandal, but by the end of Senator Baker's service as Chief of Staff, we had not only done that, but we'd concluded a very successful summit conference with President Gorbachev in Moscow, and had signed a nuclear arms reduction treaty, and accomplished a great deal of other things in those critical 18 months, which is why they're now naming airports and other things for Ronald Reagan.
Now, Pat, what was that like? I mean, to live in the midst of all of that and working for Senator Baker in the 60s, you had to have seen great change in this nation and tremendous crisis as well, with the civil rights movement and various things.
Well, people talk about how uncivilized politics are now, and I look back to when I first moved to Washington, and Washington was almost literally still smoking from the civil rights riots of 1968, right after Dr. King was assassinated. Washington was just in flames. We had Vietnam, which was tearing the country apart. Then we had Watergate, which was just a national disgrace. And in my time in the Senate and in the White House, I was able to work on those issues. And the charge that I had was to try to get the country back on even keel, to get people to talk to each other again and to be civil to each other again. And that was hard work, but it was important work, and I think we largely succeeded. So looked at in that context of how difficult things were 40 years ago or so, today's political squabbles seem a little mild by comparison.
Do you see yourself as sort of a leader in civility? I know you've been a a speaker, a guest speaker at numerous things of civility and public media, and or not just public media,
Right.
media and policy.
Well, I consider Senator Baker a leader in civility, and I'm a loyal lieutenant and learned at the feet of the master. But I do believe it's important. I have spoken extensively on this subject, and people just seem to be craving a bit more civility and decency in our politics and in our everyday lives, for that matter. And I think we've struck a responsive chord, and I think that's one of the things I like most about public television, is that in all of our news programming and public affairs programming, we keep a civil tone. Mm-hmm. and we let people from every different kind of ideology and point of view speak their minds, and we do so in a civil context. And I think the more we can understand what people are really thinking, rather than shouting at each other, the better off our country is. People on all sides of political debates have good ideas and good instincts and good information, and we need to know all of that, and that's what public broadcasting does for this country.
You talk about the importance of an investment in public broadcasting, and it's really a fairly small federal investment in this country. Is that right? Well,
it is. It's 1/100th of 1% of the federal budget. It's about $1.35 per citizen, compared with about $83 in Great Britain. That's what they pay to sustain the BBC. We're $1.35 for public television and public radio here. They're $83 in Great Britain.
Wow.
So I think this is a tremendous bargain, and it is the basis for a very successful public-private partnership. For every dollar in federal funding that we get, we generate $6 in private funding from foundations and corporations and viewers like you, and that's been one of the most successful public-private partnerships in the history of this country.
Do you think that is a message that is resonating in Washington and across the country?
Well, I think it's beginning to. Part of the problem has been that our political leaders in Washington haven't understood this relationship as well as they should. And federal funding generally provides about 15% of funding for public television and radio stations around the country. And the more rural you get, the more important that contribution is. It can be up to 50 or 60% of a rural station's budget. So it's the better our leaders understand that they are making a specific investment in education, in job training, in public safety, in public affairs, making us good citizens, helping us to understand what's at stake in our country, and making us better equipped to be to perform the duties of self-government, that they get and that they're willing to invest in. And so that's the story we have to tell in Washington. We have some great programming, and all of that programming is now being funneled through the PBS learning media prism, so that every program that we produce for PBS is going to be used for educational purposes in K through 12 classrooms going forward. It's all going to be standards based, and there are going to be all kind of curriculum assistance and so forth, so the teachers and students get a much better teaching and learning experience that reflects 21st century technologies, and keeps kids engaged so that they'll do well, they'll graduate, go on to college, and be successful citizens.
It's what we all want.
That's exactly what we want, and that's the business that we're in.
Right. You know, you had your, and you may still have your own company to consult clients.
Well, I've had to put everything on hold a little bit, but in my current capacity. But I had a communications consulting company for a long time that had clients that included President Reagan and then Vice President Bush and Henry Kissinger and Cary Grant. I don't know if your audience remembers Cary Grant or not, but he was one of my favorite clients, and he and I were friends until the day he died.
Well, you know, and you helped them share their stories, right? I mean, that's one of the things
that was part of what I did, and it's important. It was important to them, and it's important to everybody to be able to tell the right story in the right way so that it resonates with people, and that's part of what I did.
And that's part of what we need to do, right?
Exactly right.
As stations are engaged in their communities. They need to be able to share those
Well,
stories.
and as I've told everybody, the facts are on our side. We do so much in our communities, you know, different things in different communities reflecting different priorities, but education is always at the heart of it. And the more we can, the better we can tell that story to more people, the more support we're going to get, not only in Congress, but within foundations and corporations, and among the viewers who help us sustain what we're trying to do here. People want to invest in success. They don't want to just stave off failure, and that's not what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to help us do for their communities what they would like to have done. And so it's an investment in their own lives and in their own quality of life, and I think people respond to that.
It's a unique system, isn't it? I mean, having public media is a really unique setup.
Well, public media came late in the United States. In Great Britain and Canada and Japan and other places, public television came first, and the commercial broadcasters and cable operators came later. We did the opposite here in the United States. We had a very vibrant commercial broadcasting industry before public television was created, and it has caused us a little confusion in the marketplace, but the reason that it's there is because we do what nobody else will do. This is not the purview of commercial broadcasting. You know, they're there to entertain and to create large audiences for their advertisers. They treat people as consumers, which is what they should do. We treat people as citizens. And we've got a whole different set of priorities and a whole different way of doing business. And we're a safe refuge for your children. We're a civil refuge for the adults who are trying to make sense of this world. And that's something that nobody else in this business does, no matter how many channels are out there.
That's the truth. And so I'm excited that you're coming to Cookeville.
I am too, coming in April.
That's right. You're going to be with us. And you know, we're one of those rural stations that the federal money makes up 40% of our budget. So it is significant. And we love having you in Washington championing the cause.
Well, thank you.
And so we're really excited about people having an opportunity to meet you and hear what you have to say in person. How important is that, to have an opportunity to be in a small community and resonate with the citizens who will be there?
Well, I mean, I love it, and the work that you're doing in the smaller stations is some of the most important work that we try to represent and advocate in Congress. The great thing about public broadcasting, among the great things about public broadcasting, is it can bring great performances, you know, Broadway shows and the Metropolitan Opera and everything, all the wonders of the world, right here to Cookeville. And there's nothing like that anywhere else in the media world. That's what we do, that's what we're here for. And it connects you with every artistic, political capital in the world, commercial capital in the world, and you can be part of the entire global experience. It's a global economy, and Cookeville is part of it, and I think that's one of the great strengths of public broadcasting.
Well, I do too, and we're excited that you're going to be there. We really are. Let's talk just a little bit of time about you being back home. What's it like to be back in Tennessee and getting to see friends, and you know, you went to high school here in Chattanooga at Red Bank?
Red Bank, that's right. Well, my father was the acting principal of Red Bank High School, and then he became a junior high school principal, and my mother was the school secretary at Hickson Junior High School here. And and my brother and I grew up here, and this is just home. This has been the bedrock of our lives ever since we were very little kids, and I just love getting back home. I've still got a lot of friends who live here, people I worked with at the newspaper, people I went to school with, people I've gone to church with, and I just love being back to visit with them, and I'm hoping to get back a lot more often now that I've got a good excuse to come back.
That's right. Well, there are 6 stations in Tennessee, you know. So I'm sure everybody would love to have you back home in the state, without a doubt. What do you think about your, as my mama would say, your raising? What about your environment and the way you were raised in Tennessee that makes you really good at what you do?
Well, I got my start in broadcasting. as a reader of Scripture on my father's Sunday morning radio show. My father, in addition to being an educator, was a minister. And over here in South Pittsburgh, in Marion County, we had my dad had a 15-minute radio show on Sunday mornings, and my brother and I would get to read a scripture from the Bible to introduce his sermon. And so I've been in broadcasting since I was 6 years old, and it started in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee.
Wow. That's fabulous.
And you know, so the combination of the religious training that I got as a child, and the good education that I got at Red Bank and the University of Tennessee, and the introduction to media and to politics that I got at WEPG in South Pittsburgh, and the News Free Press and the Chattanooga Times here, as well as the introduction to Senator Baker, who just changed my life. I mean, I owe Tennessee everything, and I'm just glad to be here to say thank you.
Well, we're excited you're here. Your family, they're in Washington. You have 3 daughters.
I have 3 daughters. My wife Donna and I have 3 lovely daughters, and the oldest one is married, and the younger 2 are pursuing careers right now, and the oldest, I have 2 teachers and a defense contractor in my among my children, and we all get along famously, and it's been a very different life than the one I had when I was younger, but it's a good life, and we've got a close family, and I feel really quite blessed.
Did you and your wife meet in college? Or?
No, we met at the Appalachian Regional Commission in Washington, where we were both working for a while back in the mid-1970s, and I can remember the actual day and minute that I met my wife.
Okay, well, you got to share that.
It was January the 6th, 1975, at 9 o'clock in the morning. I walked off the elevator into this new job, and my wife, Donna, was the first person that I saw when I walked off the elevator. So I knew down to the minute the first time I ever met her.
That's, you know, I don't know many people could say a story like that.
Well, we've now been married for 34 years, and as Donna says, you've given me 4 of the happiest years of my life.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's true. What a great thing. So you've had your whole life in Washington with your family.
Well, most of it. I had a couple of detours in New York to work for RCA and NBC, and for Bristol Myers Company. So I've had a good chance to travel the world with my various political and business interests, and so it's been a rich, full life. I don't want to talk about it in the past tense here. I think I've got a little gas left in the tank, but I've been a very lucky man.
You do have a lot of gas left in the tank. You did a lot with working on global relations, actually, didn't you? I mean,
well, part of my job at the Post Company was to manage our international publishing relationships, and so I spent a lot of time in Japan with our partner Yomiuri Shimbun, the biggest newspaper in Japan, and in Korea with Jungang Ilbo, and you know, we were thinking about creating a Middle East edition, and we had the International Herald Tribune that we published with the New York Times in Paris, and so I was quite the global citizen there for a while.
You know, I think a lot of people are, it is a global society now, and I love so much of the programming we have in public broadcasting gives us a world view.
Right.
And yet these local stations then give you the local view. It's
right.
really a great thing. NPR has come under a lot of scrutiny in the last year, and yet it's such an important part of public broadcasting. How do you address that when people want to be so critical about
right.
NPR?
Well, I am really happy to see Gary Nell taking over as the new president of NPR. He took over last month officially. Gary had been the president of Sesame Workshop for 12 years before coming to NPR, and he and I have had some really good talks about the future of NPR, and what he wants to do is exactly what you're suggesting here, not only covering the world, which they do extremely well, but covering America much more comprehensively, including small town America much more comprehensively than they've ever been able to do before. He thinks that the public and National Public Radio really ought to reign supreme, and that we ought to get the benefit of points of view from not only various ideological standpoints, but also geographical, generational, cultural. He wants to hold up a mirror to the American society and let us have a look at ourselves and see what we like and what still needs some improving. And I think that's a very constructive way to look at his mission at NPR. And I think that's going to be a welcome innovation and a great new vision that our friends on Capitol Hill and as well as people in the rest of the country will embrace.
I think so too. I think that's a great, and he did an incredible job at Sesame Street.
He did, and he's not only been terrific about education, but he's been a wonderful advocate for us around the world. I mean, they're in India, they're in China. Sesame Street is just everywhere now. There's a Sesame Street in almost literally every country in the world, and so Gary is a real citizen of the world, and he understands how important it is for us to connect with the rest of the world, for us all to understand each other better, and that's what the NPR of the future is going to do.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited about you coming to Cookeville. I can't believe our time's up.
Oh, goodness. Well, I've had a great time. Thank you, Becky.
I have too. Thank you so much, Pat.
Okay.